Hey everybody, this is Darren Van Damme and you are watching Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies, and today I want to tell you about the new Netflix original, The Perfection. So if you're new here, welcome, but basically this is going to be a spoiler review where I explain some of the more confusing elements of the movie while also trying to contextualize some of it by talking about some other films and genres that influenced The Perfection. So this video is really for people who saw the movie, liked it, maybe you didn't like it, but you want to know a little bit more about it, maybe help unravel this story a little bit more. So right off the bat, I'll just say I liked this movie. I think as far as Netflix originals go, this is a pretty good one. I think had this come out in theaters, it would have been reviewed fairly well, and it would have had an audience that really liked it, and then also a lot of people that really hated it. It does have a weird pace. To me, it appears to be loosely influenced by some Korean thrillers and sort of horror subgenre films. Movies like Old Boy, Mother, Lady Vengeance, things like that. Movies that I really like. I don't think The Perfection is as good as those, but I think it comes close in a lot of ways. Now, almost all good horror movies are metaphorical.
It's metaphorical!
The middle portion of the movie I found to be the most interesting. So, after the two girls decide to go on this long trip together, Lizzie starts to get very sick. And the thing I really liked about this sequence is it didn't just hammer through it. That's something a lot of horror movies tend to do, or at least, you know, the big budget ones that just want to get a bunch of scares, they just hammer through it. And this movie basically doesn't really have any scares. It's almost really not a horror movie. It's really a genre film. But the way this disease or sickness started to play out, I thought was fantastic. It took a long time. They're on this bus. It gets a little bit annoying, but then there's this like interlude where Charlotte's listening to hip hop music and sort of playing with the girl in the seat. I thought that was interesting, and it went on a little long, and so did all of the sequences on the bus. I thought the sequence where Lizzie was like terrified that she was going to shit on the bus before being able to step off of it was great, because that's kind of a silly concept on paper, yet the way it was directed, me and my wife were like clutching each other. We were so nervous for her, and it was such an intense scene. And again, it's not trying to scare you, yet that is a like horrifying situation to find yourself in. And it just continues, and it continues beating down this path almost a little too long. And what worked so great about that is it's building it up, you finally see the bugs come out of her skin, and then in this very awkward way, Charlotte pulls out that cleaver, and that's the moment. Now, some people I know probably thought that was really dumb and silly and just ridiculous, and it reads kind of silly. She's just like, you know what you have to do. The reason that works so well for me is that is the moment where you're supposed to go, oh, she did plan this. She is fucking with her. I really liked that moment. I thought the visual of her holding this giant cleaver out in the mountains somewhere was pretty brilliant. And then they immediately get to the chop. I thought that was great. And right after that, they do the rewind thing, which is kind of gimmicky, but it worked so well for this story. I thought it's not brilliant. It just makes sense to tell the story that way. And I wasn't frustrated that we were dialing the clock back. It only helped everything else make sense. And they were able to sort of retread some ground without really boring me, which is tricky to do. Like, we're watching the story play through it another way, and I thought it was a completely interesting way to watch it. By going back through the story, like I said, again, the dialogue doesn't have to explain it. That's kind of a cheap, easy way to add some exposition. They let the story play out, and we're able to sort of understand things without the writer like holding our hand the whole way, which I always appreciate. Now, for me, during this flashback, that's where the movie sort of, it didn't lose me, but this is sort of the weakest point of the story, is that we really have to accept how heavy the manipulation was at this school for the only recourse to be for Lizzie to chop her arm off and not be able to play cello anymore. That's pretty intense. Now, it worked great on film, Yet, story-wise, that's the part where you kind of have to stretch. Like, there's a bunch of other ways that could have maybe been handled. However, I don't hold it against the movie. It ultimately played back on that theme multiple times as the movie went on in a way that I thought was really pretty great. If not realistic, still pretty entertaining. And that brings up one of my last points, is that ultimately what the metaphor for this is, and ultimately the type of movie that it is, it's a rape revenge fantasy. Now, in terms of the story, this isn't a fantasy in somebody's head. It really happens, but it's sort of overreaching, and it's the type of revenge that victims, not just of sexual assault, but of really any type of assault or violent acts. It's a type of revenge people don't really get, which is why it's a fantasy. There's the great scene, I thought the really fantastic scene where she's having to play perfectly, and then the other girl is going to be quote unquote punished, which is just super grim. I thought the director was very delicate in that one missed note. The camera bumps a little bit. And then Steven Weber as the villain, that's another weak point for me. I thought he did a great job. I was actually kind of impressed by him, but I saw that coming from a mile away. As soon as they were introducing him and he was sort of in this position of power, addressing the crowd before this concert with his scarf and his sort of like weird affectations, he read villain to me from a mile away. I didn't necessarily know where the story was going to go, but I kind of marked him as the bad guy. That might just be me. If you flagged him as the bad guy early on, let me know in the comments below. But I thought his performance was great. His face drops as soon as that note's misplayed. The camera bumps a little bit. That's all they did. There was no screech of the cello or anything. This movie did a great job of using subtlety and then of being just bombastic in other ways. And I thought it had a really nice balance with that, and also a really nice balance with some of its themes. For instance, him cutting Charlotte's arm, literally just filleting it open right before they get one over on him, really added some nice balance, and then sort of gave you that scene at the end where they're playing the cello together. Again, that sort of adds to the fantasy element. You get this really incredible visual of the two women, one-armed women playing the cello, and then he's just completely like quadriplegic, a blind quadriplegic, having to listen to them. It's weird, but that's where I think it's sort of coming from, these really macabre Korean films, like some of the ones I mentioned. It plays out great on film. It's a great visual representation of their revenge, and then sort of also representation of them coming together. And I think another one of the themes that ultimately came out of this movie is sort of the kinship that victims of crimes like that may feel, sort of that shared experience, that shared horrific experience, and how it can bring people together. And these two women are missing something. Something was taken from them, their arm, like a physical thing, sort of metaphorically represents what's taken from somebody when they're assaulted like that, the piece of them that's taken away, yet they're able to come together and sort of be whole again. That's ultimately what you're left with. And it's done in this really weird way. I'm not saying it's not weird and far-fetched, but as far as a movie goes, it makes for something really entertaining. And it's the only time you're going to get to see that visual, to see these two one-armed women playing a cello together for a guy that's been just like completely cut apart. It just makes for something that's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And I appreciate those things, especially in a movie like The Perfection, where all the themes are tied together really neatly with a bow on it. I thought that it was just a very appropriate way to end this really weird movie. Now, the media coverage of this movie features a lot of Me Too stuff, which I think is ridiculous. Yes, it is a rape revenge, but it's, Me Too is sort of a new thing. It's sort of going after people in power that are abusing that power and using it to victimize others. And yes, it does really circle heavily around sexual assault. And this movie did feature somebody in power, so I can kind of see it. However, The rape revenge genre, and it is a genre, has been around for decades, for easily 40 years, just to name a few movies that maybe inspired The Perfection. You've got Straw Dogs, 1971. There's currently a remake on Netflix that I don't necessarily recommend. You've got Last House on the Left from 1972. There's a remake of that I don't necessarily recommend. You've got Deathwish from 1974. There's a remake of that and the original. Those are both on Prime. I Spit on Your Grave, 1978. It has a remake I don't recommend. Miss 45 from 1981. Sudden Impact, which is a Dirty Harry movie from 1983. Irreversible, which is a super grim and possibly the best one on this list, including being above The Perfection. It's really great, but it is grim. If you have any kind of sensitivity to sexual assault, do not watch this movie. It's way too real. Lady Vengeance is a South Korean film that it's good, and it's definitely one of the influencers for The Perfection. Teeth from 2007, which is about a girl who has teeth in her vagina. One of the sillier ones, but still handles the themes really, really well. And then my personal favorite on the list, The Horseman from 2008. Very, very dark movie from Australia about a father whose daughter is abducted and put into like sex trafficking and pornography, and man, does he go after the people responsible. It's just really my type of movie. It's a little bit too heavy for me, but the revenge aspect and the way it plays out is whoo. So those are just some examples, some really good examples. In fact, I think a lot of the ones on that list are maybe better than The Perfection, but again, The Perfection basically being a made-for-TV movie is pretty fantastic. So that is it for this review. If you like it, definitely click the like button. If you're new here and you're still watching, absolutely click that subscribe button and the little bell so you get notified when I put new videos out just like this one. I'm on Twitter, people. If you've been a long-time follower, you can follow me at Darren Van Damme. As of recording this, I have not tweeted anything yet, so go ahead and follow me over there and you get to see my first tweet. I still don't know what that's going to be. I'm trying to make it epic, but I might just post something to get it out of the way. But I will keep making videos like this as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking this one out, and you will see me on the next one. If you'd like to support the show, you can do so a number of ways. You can become a Patreon supporter like one of these fine people. You can also follow the Amazon link in the description. There's a Teespring store. There's all sorts of ways, but likes, comments, shares. Shares are good because it means other people watch it. Those are always appreciated. And you can, of course, again, follow the Twitter, Instagram, at Flick Connection. And there's links to all of this stuff in the description below. And then, if you like this, definitely check out some of my older videos as well. There's plenty of recent content I post multiple times a week. But that wraps it up for this one.